The psychedelic revolution is here. If you want to integrate your visionary experiences into your purpose, get clear on your entrepreneurial path, and help people while you do what you love, then this podcast is for you. Welcome to The Psychedelic Entrepreneur, Medicine for These Times. I'm your host, Beth Weinstein. I'm a spiritual business coach, 3-time entrepreneur, and a lifelong student of psychedelics and sacred plant medicines. You carry your own unique medicine, and your medicine is what we need for these times. This podcast will help you to share your medicine so you can create transformation in the world. Listen in on conversations with psychedelic leaders, changemakers, and conscious entrepreneurs who are living proof that a better world is possible when you follow your heart and live in alignment with your soul. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Medicine for These Times. I am really honored to have two women here with us today from Colorado, the front lines of the psychedelic renaissance, as we might call it. Shannon Hughes and Dory Lewis from Elemental Healing. Is that the correct? No, not Elemental Healing.
That is okay. It is Elemental Psychedelics.
Oh, that's it. Okay.
Yes. And then Reflective Healing is the micro healing center that we are connected to and that I founded. Yeah.
Oh, what? I'm like, wait, who's Elemental Healing then? Okay.
Elemental Healing.
My brain fog is connecting the two and weaving them together.
They're very related. They are sister companies. So, it's actually technically not wrong.
Yeah. Oh, it's great. No, I actually have told my audience, yesterday was the first day where I've not been sick for almost 2 months. I've had a sinus infection on this side of my ear, which has actually affected my brain. So I apologize. But, let's get into it. So you're working in Colorado and you have training and then working in the psychedelic space. Just a really quick overview. What led you to the path that you're on now? How'd you get here? And I always love to know, did you ever have a different career in, as a corporate attorney or something like that, as I always say?
Yeah. I can start. So I've been a licensed professional counselor for a number of years. I started working in 2012 after I graduated from Columbia University and was I'm from New York originally. So I worked there and I worked in Brooklyn and the Bronx and Manhattan. And then so I was really in the trenches of community mental health for a long time, foster care. So I worked in some really tough spaces and had a very strong clinical background. Columbia was obviously very clinical heavy. We certainly didn't talk about alternative medicines. Let's just say it was very much not Naropa or Pacifica, right? So just a very, traditional mental health program. And I am a therapist and practiced for many years. And it was actually through meeting the needs of my clients that I got into the psychedelic work, because we were kind of hitting some roadblocks with some pretty severe depression. And I heard through the grapevine from other clients and other people in the community about ketamine-assisted psychotherapy and wanted to help this one client individually. And it kind of just developed from there. I will also name, I personally had been doing psychedelics since a very young age. But I never imagined the two worlds would kind of collide necessarily, that my professional world and my recreational drug use world were going to kind of actually bridge and become a very important part of my life. So, without going into too much detail, that's kind of how I came to be involved in the psychedelic realm.
Amazing. Wow. And thank you, by the way, as someone who lived in New York City for 21 years. And I had friends working in what we would call the trenches of the system there. Thank you. Because that is absolutely no joke. So if you can hold space for that world, yeah, thank you. And Shannon, what was your journey into getting here as well? I'm curious.
Right. I was in academia for the last 15 years as a professor, tenure track, got tenured, took a sabbatical for a year, came back from sabbatical, and was like, something's got to give. Academia is just not my world anymore. It wasn't feeding me in the same way. But my academic career has been in studying how and why we use psychotropic drugs in our behavioral health systems. And it intersected with psychedelics also through the research and through like personal use and, being in community, doing, harm reduction in the community. And so it was kind of a slow burn over several years of combining like my academic research with psychotropic drugs, psychiatric medications, people's lived experiences with them, the clinical trial research base with psych drugs. And then, again, merging these worlds of what I was doing outside of academia and then finally leaving academia in the last year to really build what we're doing with Elemental and continue. I've maintained a private practice for a number of years as a spiritual coach. So even though my background's in social work, I never adopted a clinical practice because it just didn't feel like it was something missing. And I think, teaching in social work for the last 15 years, I was always wondering, like, where's the role for our inner guidance, our intuitive self, our spirituality in this world? We sort of like teach it out of our students. And I really wanted to find ways to let it sort of reintegrate. And so I maintained my own practice in spiritual coaching while being a tenured professor and also in the psychedelic world. So finally got to merge all of those identities and practices through Elemental and what we're doing right now here in Colorado.
Amazing. And yes, honors to you for surviving academia as well. It's, I say this with a grain of salt and also, kiddingly, because I've had numerous amounts of clients who've come from what we would call these traditional paths of, traditional psychotherapy, a lot of nurses, people coming from academia. And it's unfortunate because there's a lot of persistent burnout. And then a lot of what you just mentioned, leaving out so much of the soul, the spirit, this path that we all know to be true, but it was shunned upon, even in traditional psychotherapy or academia or some of these, nurses. I've even had doctors, like doctors leaving their entire career behind to move into the medicine space because of this. So, I laugh because it's so common. And it's like, well, when are these traditional systems going to get on board? Who knows? I think more and more each day, right? So then how did you two meet and come to form what you're up to now? And tell us a little bit about both of that. What is it that you offer now and how'd you meet? Yeah.
It's a little sprinkle of magic here and there and the universe pulling threads together. It was, Dory and I actually shared an office building in our private practices. And so sort of we're in each other's orbits for a long time. And I think we're just sort of testing each other out. I think we both are people who are, trying to hold a lot of like integrity and really are slow to like vet people and build trust, and both very independent people and have always built our careers pretty independently. And so like merging worlds and coming into like a real collaborative partnership with another human was not something that either one of us were like, just looking for really or eager to jump into. So we really sort of orbited around each other for a while and then started inviting each other to like, hey, I'm doing this retreat. Why don't you come along and like co-facilitate with me? Or, oh, hey, you know what? Let me share my gifts with you a little bit and see how it lands for you. And so I think it was just that over time of like building a lot of trust. And then honestly, on my sabbatical, I went to Croatia for a month and Dory came to visit. And something around that period of time, just sort of everything cohered. And there was this just vision, this really powerful shared vision that emerged, that we both came back home from that trip from Croatia. And I was like, okay, I'm leaving academia. And here we are. We birthed this idea of Elemental as like a women-run program, and with really honoring our gifts that we had been sharing with each other and wanting to bring that space, sort of expand that space out of ourselves. Like we want to honor each person's gifts that they're bringing into this space and really come from a place of abundance. Like you're enough and your gifts are enough. And here there's enough for everybody. And we can really like be in community and witness each other and like everybody sort of lift each other up. And, you know, we've been doing that in our relationship and said, and sort of, you know, birthed that into this vision for Elemental. Dory, would you add anything?
Love it.
No, I think that was perfectly said. I think we both, it's really true. We took a lot of time, and I think that we hope that the way our relationship built is also the way that people's relationship with the medicine builds, is like over time building a relationship and yeah.
Beautiful. I love these stories because it really represents so much of what I think those of us who know understand this, but it's like the new paradigm that is very opposite of the way it's been running for hundreds of years that really doesn't serve anybody and is rooted in like deep wounding amongst the collective. You know, it's like this competition and scarcity and this, you know, like fighting one another. And you know, this is the new way of leadership, is collaboration. You know, the more we grow together, you know, and really for the greater good of all, and not for just for the self, really for the collective healing of the clients that you serve and those that, you know, are affected by them. So I love it. I love these stories too. Total synchronicities. So then, you know, I had mentioned, you know, when I had heard about you guys from a common friend that we have, I was like, oh, I'm curious because I haven't talked to many people except friends that live there about the current state of what's going on with legalization and plant medicine. And, you know, it's been what year are we in? It's been a couple of years since, God, it's so weird how fast all of this moves, right? Since Colorado has passed, I even forgot their measure because I know a lot about Oregon and I don't know that much about Colorado. And I was like, what's going on there? Because I've heard, you know, various things and mixed, you know, rumblings in the collective. And then there was a lot of arguing against the legalization, which I, even myself, as someone who's been on this journey for over 30 years, I had a lot of doubts and I still do. You know, it's still like, how do we navigate this with skillfully for the greater good and, you know, like work within the systems? And, you know, I'm wondering, like, how is it going there? Because I do have former clients that worked in Oregon, and Oregon's been, you know, it's been kind of interesting how it's shaken out. But yeah, like, what's the current state of legalization there? If you can even answer that, it's maybe very vague.
Oh no, I mean, it's amorphous, like it's moving, but we are kind of at a critical milestone. So Prop 122 was the measure in Colorado, and what was really different about Prop 122 relative to Oregon, and also what just happened in New Mexico through their legislature, Colorado was much more expansive than either of those states are or will be. And so we have in Prop 122, and this was, you know, Prop 122 originally started as a regulated access model. And then the community really advocated to add a parallel path of personal use. And that got in there and it passed. So we have a really expansive model that has like multiple pathways to be able to like work within. So from personal use, where you could just grow, gift, share, use, no possession limits, right? Share with friends, do community healing circles. If you're not getting paid for it and you're not advertising it as like part of a business, you can just do that. And then you also have the regulated access model, where you have clinical and non-clinical paths. So if you are an LPC like Dory, or a clinical social worker or a nurse practitioner, any sort of clinical license, you can also add a mushroom facilitator license to your scope of practice under your professional, you know, license with the state. So, but you don't have to. So it's also open to anybody from any background. So we have yoga instructors and, you know, energy healers and real estate agents who want to change in career or restaurant workers. It's really wide open, and it's actually the same training program for everybody. It's just that we're very careful to like make sure folks are staying within their scope of practice. And that's what we really, really highlight. And that's true for clinical professionals also, or if you're an addictions counselor or you're a palliative care doctor. We're really wanting people, yes, you can add that mushroom facilitator license to your work, but still also we're making sure that folks are staying within their scope of practice. And then, we're rolling out the first healing centers have received licenses. The first cultivators, I think 2 cultivators have received cultivation licenses, and a testing facility to test the medicine. And so we are fully ready. Like all of the pieces, there's licensed facilitators now. And so medicine is being distributed for the very first time, probably as of about this week. There's like licensed medicine that's hitting the market, coming to healing centers this week. And we'll be doing our Colorado-based practicum this summer. So using licensed medicine in Colorado, training our therapists and like wellness facilitators, which will also be one of the first here in Colorado. So it's a really big moment right now.
Yeah. And I'm curious, thank you for sharing. And this is very exciting, by the way. Because I know in Oregon, and again, I don't even know how Oregon has changed since my former clients that worked in some of these regulated programs. Did they change the way that, let's say, psilocybin was being distributed when it comes to grams versus, I think they had changed it to like the different measurement. And then in doing so, the price actually was higher than what we would call like the street price. Did you find anything around that?
Yes. It's so unfortunate. It's expensive. One, because you have to like pay for all the licensing and, security for the cultivator and getting it tested. And, so there's like many more layers. And if you just, grow it and, it's not expensive to be able to grow and share mushrooms.
Yeah.
But it becomes expensive when you add all these regulatory layers to it. And so, yes. And Colorado's statutes, it's measured by like milligrams of psilocin actually. And and it's really strange to try to like do all of the conversions, but I think we were talking to a manufacturer recently because we're allowed to have chocolates, we're allowed to make teas, you could have it ground up in capsules. So there are like different forms you can purchase it in as a licensed facilitator or healing center. But I think the conversion was something like almost like $50 per like a dried gram. If you were going to do the equivalent of like a dried gram of mushrooms that you would just buy, from somebody, it was like $50 a dried gram, which is pretty expensive.
Yeah. And this is where I always say I do believe that there's room for everything. And I do believe, like, I used to use the example of like, well, my mom would never go down to the jungle and drink ayahuasca amongst tarantulas, in an open aired hut, like never. But, maybe she would never actually in this lifetime, but maybe she would go to like a service center where it is a lot more regulated and, potentially quote safer. And but there was so much criticism, I know, because one of my former clients helped open Oregon's first psilocybin service center around the cost. And the first defense that even I said was like, no one really understands how much you're spending in lawyers, the regulatory fees, the licensing. I mean, and then the actual medicine. And then I don't know if there's the same rules where you have to have like, I think in Oregon, it was like their minimum like 2 staff per participants. I don't know. Oh, that's good. That helps drop the price a little.
No, yeah, Colorado did make some improvements. You don't have to have 2 people there. The security requirements are a lot less because we have micro centers also. So if you're, having less than 750 milligrams of psilocybin on site, then you really don't need the extra security requirements. You don't need to have extra staff there. You don't need to have restricted areas. So there is more freedom. Good. But Dora, do you want to speak a little bit about the cost and pricing?
Yeah, because it's we all see this out there on the internet, and I'm wondering if maybe it's kind of chilled out a little in the last year and a half or 2 years. But there was like people were up in arms over like, oh my God, it's going to cost $2,500 to $3,500. It's people also forget how long. It's like I think there's just this perception out there in the media, like in the public, that it's like you take a mushroom and then you come out cured. And it's like people expect that to be like, oh, it's a $150 therapy session. It's so different, right? But yeah, please share. I'd love to hear your views on this.
Yeah, so reflective healing is my private practice that I founded in 2018, and we just became a micro healing center. And I've been paying all the fees, right, to make sure that we're crossing our T's, dotting our I's, and being doing what we need to do to become, to have all the necessary licenses and approvals. And while that has been an expensive process, and it has, I'm not going to lie about that. I'll admit I worked in the underground for many years, and my prices then will probably be similar to the prices that we'll be charging at our clinic, and it's not going to be $2,500. That's to me, that's more than I would have charged as an underground provider. Now there are underground providers who were charging that and more. My hope is, at Reflective Healing, that we're going to do sliding scale. So it's going to be based on, the green bottle approach, which people can look up and learn about. It's a more detailed way of looking at a sliding scale. I don't need to see your pay stubs necessarily. But I think on average, we're looking at between $900 and $1,500. And don't quote me on that, right? Like it could be less, it could be more. I'm in the process of figuring it out and doing numbers. But I want it to be, and people have to understand that is accessible, actually. That's very accessible. There's a therapist who is going to be, who paid probably around $10,000 just to get trained to be able to sit with you. And they have to clear their entire day to be able to sit with you. Maybe normally they would be seeing 5 or 6 clients at between 150 and 200 an hour, maybe, or 125 to 200, somewhere in that range. So, it is really something that I think people have to recognize takes a lot of time. And in Colorado, the integration session or this follow-up session is included in that cost. So, and I'm allowing the providers who work for me to set their own rates. So I'm giving a very broad average. It could be more, like I said, it could be less. But that's where I'm hoping to kind of find our average point is between those two numbers. And I will name as a clinic, like I've spent a lot of money on this process, and put a lot of energy into all of the work behind it. And like you said, it's not like you're going to come in and do this $1,200, $1,500 session and come out and no longer have OCD. Like that's probably not going to happen. And at Reflective Healing at my clinic and many other clinics are going to be operating differently. We really value building a relationship. So we're not just doing like, you come in for a screening, you do your administration session of mushrooms, you have your integration session, and you're no longer working with us. We believe in building a therapeutic or a relationship and a container where someone actually feels safe enough to let their guard down under the influence, because people think that mushrooms are just going to blast down all their protectors, and it won't. If you're afraid, right? I see, like if you're afraid or there's a part of you holding back, you're not going to journey, and you're not going to get into the stuff that your ego or your conscious is protecting you from. So you have to be within a container where you feel safe and held and trusting. And you might not feel like that after just meeting somebody once. In fact, I would say that that's probably not healthy to feel like, oh yeah, I could totally be fully let all of my shadow and demons out of the closet with this person that I just met 24 hours ago. Like, no, you might want to build a relationship with someone over time and connect and feel like they understand me. They don't judge me. I trust who they are. And then a really quality mushroom session can take place, that could be very impactful. That could be 6 months after doing prep it with somebody, and yeah, for some people it could be a few weeks, but for many people it's probably going to be a fair amount of time building this connection at my clinic, right? And with the folks that I'm working with, because we're mental health providers at Reflective Healing. So we're going to be mostly dealing with folks that have mental health needs. I get a lot of folks, I have trauma, I have OCD, I am dealing with a large grief. Those things are going to take some relationship building for us to be able to help somebody with. And so I think, like you said, this myth that we come in, we do this one session, it costs this amount. Like, this process can cost a lot, just like therapy does. But I will say that you could probably do what you would do in 5 to 10 years of therapy in like 2 years. And that's saving a lot of money overall, right? That's proactive mental health care, or, more like you could be in talk therapy for like a decade and get to what you could within maybe 2 years of doing a good psychedelic talk therapy with other modalities woven in there. And that, I think, is more the realistic expectation that people can have, is that it could be maybe a few years if you're really dealing with deep mental health stuff, but it might not be a decade.
Although I'm like, how long have I been working with medicines?
Right, me too.
I mean, because it's funny, because there is, and I think the media has hopefully calmed it down a little bit, but there was kind of this frenzy about 5 years ago where it was like, oh, take this and it'll heal everything and it'll make you feel better. And it's like, well, we have to get to the root cause of what's causing the anxiety or the depression. It's not another mask. It's not going to just make you feel better, and that's that. It's actually the opposite, right? It's going to bring up more to the surface, and exactly. It does. I mean, I've always wondered that as well. It's like, to go in really deep into any kind of medicine journey, it doesn't really matter what it is. It's like, you really have to be comfortable and safe. And I don't know if I would feel good just going right in with someone I just met. And so this is something I've helped my clients with too, is building a model that's actually serves the client a lot more. That's not just about the psychedelic journey. It's about the whole entire container of the healing. Like, what is the intention behind it? What are you preparing for when you go in? And then, integration, as I always say, is more than just one session. It's day-to-day life, right? It's like, we are all integrating all the time, and look at the world we live in. It's just constant, it's like, it's a gigantic psychedelic journey. We need to be doing the integration work. And it's not just like, oh, I took a trip, I had one session. It's like, well, there might be, layers and layers and layers that takes a few years. So I'm glad you mentioned building a relationship. And, this is where I kind of question a lot of the like, I'm a big fan of the movement, right? Like, I want healing available to all. I believe all of these should have been legalized a long time ago. I'm a little more on that side of like hands off altogether, but who knows how it would affect our society. But when it's like, when we look around in the world that we live in and what people are struggling with, it's like, people need help. And I'm wondering, being in Colorado, and now that, there is a little more movement. And by the way, I do also want to name, you mentioned it is actually less expensive, and especially also coming from my perspective, being like working in this industry as like very front lines business coach. There's retreats that people go on. There's centers in Jamaica, Netherlands, wherever. I mean, they're usually starting at least at 5,000. I mean, most of them even more. I mean, I probably like you guys, I've heard 10,000, 15, 40. There's even someone out there, and I know the name, $40,000.
For one session, for a month, one session. With a cocktail of medicines, which it's a whole other discussion.
Yeah. It's someone who bills themselves as like serving a certain demographic of, celebrities and such. So, and there's a couple other people like that out there that bill themselves as like, well, I'm the facilitator for the celebrities, so it's $40,000 instead of, $2,000. I don't know. I mean, to each their own. I try not to judge, but in the grand perspective, like you said, it's about the lifetime. It's like, you could be in talk therapy and not really get anywhere, or you could, dive into this work and see real healing and progress. But I'm curious, in Colorado, are you finding that, is it mostly locals coming, or are people like now coming there from out of state? Like it's becoming a destination for this kind of work, yeah?
Well, it's hard to say because and Dory, has a wait list of, I don't know, 200 or something people, or an interest list of 200 something people, and many of them out of state. And, in our practice, we get out of state inquiries just pretty constantly, weekly. And, but, we're just rolling this out. Like the first healing centers just opened. Medicine is coming out this week.
Yeah.
So we don't really have, data to look at to really know who the demographics are, who's getting services, what kind of healing centers. We're going to need another year. Like, let's check back next summer and we'll actually be able to see how this is rolling out. But I would suspect that it's, I think a lot of folks from out of state are definitely interested. You get a lot of calls because you can do preparation and integration in Colorado virtually. It's just the administration session has to take place in Colorado. So it makes it, pretty easy for folks from out of state to come in for a weekend and do a session and then continue getting support afterwards. As Dory said, if that's I know that is the model that some healing centers will adopt. Right. Let's do our 1 or 2 prep sessions virtually. You come to Colorado for the weekend. You've got an Airbnb. Come to our healing center. We'll give you what you want and you can go home. Within that, there's a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
But yes.
Yeah. We'll see what happens. It's really interesting as hopefully this movement keeps growing. And, I know where I live, it's probably going to take a while in New York State, but in Massachusetts, unfortunately, had a little bit of a halt. But let's talk a little bit about, so you guys also have a training program. And as I said off camera, I'm always a little hesitant because it's a wild west out there. I always preface it by saying I don't platform facilitators that I've never sat with. Unless I know them extremely well or have worked with them. I've platformed some of my clients that I've worked with for 6 to 12 months. But I was curious about what you're up to, how it's different. It is, I've had a lot of clients go through pretty much, if you name all the names of the big psychedelic training programs out there, they've been through all of them. And I've been through one myself. And it's interesting to observe and see. Like, I don't think there is such a thing as the one perfect program. Even, some of the esteemed like universities offering this, I've heard, much criticism. So, I always like to say to everyone, look, there's no such thing as the perfect program. I also, and I'm wondering how you feel about this as well. I also believe that it's necessary to have a multidimensional amount of training. Like, maybe go do a separate, somatic therapy training, or at least some kind of separate training on this, that, the body, the energy system, the traumas, because there's only so much a psychedelic training can provide out there. But yeah, let me ask, like, what is yours? Is it centered around psilocybin in particular, or just all psychedelics? And tell me a little bit more about it, please.
Well, we're a DORA approved program, which is the Department of Regulatory Agencies here in Colorado. And what that means is that we have to meet certain requirements set by the state in order to move our facilitators along with certain curriculum so that they graduate with a certain number of hours in certain topics. So we have been approved, and there's a number of other programs. There's some in Oregon that are Colorado approved, I think, and then we have a number here in Colorado. So I will name that that's a piece of this. It is mushroom focused. So this is a psilocybin mushroom program, and that is within the requirements for DORA. It's about a five-ish month program, and Shannon and I always explain this is like the 150-hour basic training. This in and of itself is not necessarily, yes, the state says this is enough to be a facilitator, but we think that that's like bare minimum, right? just because you come to this program, we still believe, and luckily the state requires that they do practicum and they do consultation as well. However, we believe in what, like, basically what you said, Beth, which is folks should also have knowledge of trauma, of somatic skills and understanding at the minimum, and have other experiences and trainings under their belt if possible. We really encourage that, because we can't teach everything on trauma informed care or how to treat clients with trauma. We're not a therapy, we're not like a licensed therapy program. That's not what we're teaching. We're not teaching about mental health. And yet that's a huge part of being a facilitator. We're not teaching about, how to understand, somatic, the way that the body holds trauma, or how to help somebody whose body is in a physically traumatized state. We touch on these things, but we are not having full, sections of our course that cover that in too much detail. And I think to be a really skilled facilitator, it takes learning those things. Now, as I think we've learned in traditional models, is you learn these things over time. You don't just like attend one program and get everything you need. That being said, Elemental Psychedelics does try to incorporate a lot of in-person experiences where we get folks to be in their bodies in shared space with other people and doing somatic practices and bringing in learning about attunement and attachment. And we really believe that doing that in shared physical space is one of the best ways to learn those things. I think it's really hard to learn about embodiment as a floating head on a Zoom screen. I think that's kind of, I don't see how those things can really match. So we definitely have a lot of in-person opportunities. We are small. We don't have like a 150 person cohort. Our cohorts are pretty small, between 25 and 30 people. And that's really where we're at right now. And we try to have we have a nice faculty. We have a lot of guest speakers that come in and teach new special topics. So we try to give our students access to different types of knowledge bases and people who are skilled in their areas of expertise. So we're not the only ones teaching. We have a lot of other folks coming in to teach on things. Like we had someone yesterday coming in talking about chronic pain. We had someone come and speak about grief. We have psychopharmacology with a psychiatrist. We have someone coming in to talk about trauma. So we have different folks that are joining and offering their voices so that our students get a diversity of knowledge and information from different sources, not just from us. Shannon, do you want to speak to this more?
I would just want to add that, part of the reason that Dory and I came together in this co-creation is like seeing some of the harms that we've seen in the psychedelic space. I've been in nonprofit organizing for many years in Colorado now, and there's this like patriarchal form of leadership, and like a lot of spaces that I've been in with like male-bodied leadership that I just became a little disillusioned by. It's a particular style of leadership that felt not that hierarchies are bad, but there's a sense of like there's a lot of guruship. There's a lot of like power over rather than like power with, and collaborative forms of like, how power and wisdom is like distributed across people and how can we harness that. And, there's a lot of just like personalities I found in leadership spaces that, once I got kind of close enough to them, I was like, really? This is what we got? And I came a little disillusioned by that. And it's not that Dory and I are like, oh, we can do better. We just feel that, like, what? Like, why not, like, women? Like, part of this movement is a feminine rising, I think. And, like, the feminine is sort of held, like, it's just part of, I guess, this psychedelic, like, resurgence. And we really wanted to, like, give some strong, like, leadership and voice. Like, what does feminine leadership look like? What does power with communities look like? What does it look like to be in a mode of like receptivity when we're creating something and like bringing our hands to something in the world from a place of like deep listening and like embodiment and being in community and like sharing this wisdom, you know, that like sort of harnessing it like in our community and being embodied. Like, so we were just like feeling all these things that it's certainly in Colorado, I can speak to. I just felt it was lacking. I feel like there's a lot of like male leadership that I just felt was incomplete. Just, it wasn't hitting a note that we felt like is just calling to be hit. And we're doing what we can do to bring our hands to it because we both have a strong sense of like, yeah, we can be big. We can show up. We can bring our hands to this from a place of like listening and receptivity. And let's see what we can create. Let's see what we can co-create with our community here in Colorado and what we can give voice to. And that just feels like an important part of this initiative. Yeah.
And thank you so much for sharing that. In full transparency, yesterday I was on an interview with someone else who works in this space, and she was interviewing me, and we talked off camera for about an hour after the interview about this exact topic. Because both of us have been out there publicly for about the same amount of time, and what I witnessed when I first walked into this space, and I've had a previous business that was in a extremely male-dominant industry in the athletic and fitness apparel industry. And I was shocked at that and how I was received back then. That was a long time ago. And then when I was already coaching for a while, but when I came out into the public about my own psychedelic path, I was pretty shocked at how I was received. And it was actually, it was exactly that. It was, I hate to say this publicly, but it was white males over a particular age. And it was actually very disheartening. And we're continuing to see some of it. Not surprisingly, this is the larger collective wound that's happening. And I think so many of us see a better way. And not to say, even the word better, like you said, it's like, well, maybe it's not better, but it's like, well, let's try it this other way that hasn't really been tried for a long time. And I personally did my training that was led by a woman, and it felt very collaborative and yet still learning from someone extremely experienced. And it was really nice. It was very like nourishing. And I actually had some of my own biggest personal growth just in that training program, which is kind of shocking. I always laugh. I'm like, wow, we were practicing on each other with a very low dose, like a microdose. And I had one of the biggest breakthroughs in my life. And I'm like, wow, what does that say, But holding that energy, like you mentioned. And I think, I have had clients go through some of these programs. And unfortunately, I have had a client, even just a year ago, tell me she was leaving a program that she had already paid for because of that vibration, and it was very unsupportive for her. And it's tough because I think we have seen this a lot, and it is time to be a little more outspoken about it, or a lot more outspoken, and not even just speaking out, but like holding that energy, like you said, doing it a different way and standing for something else. I think we are seeing a lot of criticism. It's not new, but every few months there's some new drama that surfaces, and there's something new just the other week that surfaced. There was a lot of discussion around, and it wasn't just men or male, but it was like, like people throw in the word narcissism, ego, even the word narcissist. I'm like, well, everybody's a narcissist now, right? But just like how many people are, not even really watching their own integrity, or not even seeing, the projections they may have, or how what they say lands for 40% of their students, or whatever it is, So I'm glad you're speaking up about this, and it's been very interesting to watch as someone who's witnessed a lot of clients go through these trainings and come out of them, and in spaces, even facilitated spaces where they've been co-facilitating with men. And again, it's not to make the masculine wrong, but really to just like like what's going on here? I think we know on a deeper level what's going on, but it's been hard. So I'm glad you're talking about this. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. And Dory, I mean, I was just thinking as Beth was talking about, like, you sort of fell into a bit of a new specialty yourself and like working with people who have been harmed in psychedelic spaces for a variety of reasons.
Yeah. Lately I've been, that's really what's been coming through my door is a number of people, providers and clients who are coming out of traumatic psychedelic experiences because they were not well held, and unskilled facilitators, even who went through trainings and who are just not, they don't know what they don't know. And so I'm finding this special niche that is showing up at my doorstep and I'm responding to because I've experienced trauma in psychedelic spaces. And as a psychedelic trainer, some of like the reason why I started Elemental was I had a bad experience in a program that I was teaching at with men in leadership who really dismissed the women in the space and consistently and ongoingly, and it was pretty difficult. And found Elemental partially because it was like, I don't need that, so
yeah. I mean, it was just interesting because even yesterday when I was speaking with this friend, and some of us like, everybody speaks and talks, and eventually, the word gets out. And I think, I always say I do believe these things do sort themselves out. I mean, there's a point, and we've seen this, right? We've seen pretty well-respected, even like famous people have things really come to the surface and, I mean, I would say like ruin their career or maybe, have their career take an extremely different turn. And it is something that I'm finding it's really sad. It's sad how many people have, I get this a lot. Random people off the internet will tell me their story about something that harmed them or, traumatized them. And I'm like, well, here's some resources, I can't hold this. I mean, I guess I could, but, but there's more and more happening and it's unfortunate. And I do believe it's necessary to voice this and talk about it. And I think, also teach about like, well, what's really happening here? And thank God more and more people are talking about like, well, this is what's actually happening when, something's amplified or, even transference. I'm like, does anyone even teach that in these training programs? It's like, even I know what that is, I'm like, we do, I've made jokes about, I'm like, gosh, are they even teaching the very basics of like 101? And I'm glad you do. And I'm assuming that if it's like baseline training programs around in legal states, I'm assuming it's part of the curriculum, but I don't know, like the one I went through was very different than, maybe one of these like kind of, the one I went through was like very underground, but, we'll see. I always say like, we'll see. And I pray that some bad stories don't ruin it for everybody. I think everybody says that. Like, it could just take one really bad story or, one really bad case. But, and I do remind people, even though we hear everyone loves to focus on the abuse cases, there are so many good people doing good work out there, and I do believe in the end, like the healing that's happening still outweighs the amount of, unskillfulness and abuse. I hope. I don't know.
I agree.
That's what I would like to think.
Mm-hmm.
So my last question I always ask a lot of my guests is, where do you see this all going? Like, what do you think the future looks like in the next, I don't know, it's hard to even look into the future these days, but 5 years or 10 years, like, do you believe that psychedelics will be like 100% legalized around the US? Do you believe that it's just, it's like more and more people are taking healing into their own hands? Like, do you feel like it's all going in a positive direction? I'm curious.
I think when it comes to like the mushrooms, like they kind of speak for themselves in that they're like, the way they work is going to become apparent to people. And I think that as a culture, we're going to have a bit of a reckoning around what healing is. Healing, in my opinion, healing is not taking away the things that hurt. It is creating a larger container to hold all of it, with compassion and nourishment. So my hope is that there's like kind of a shift in how we understand healing, and that maybe mushrooms and the spirits, that are coming through the fungi are kind of here to teach us this new way of expanding our hearts to hold more of ourselves and each other. That's my hopeful perspective, and that the mushrooms, although I think it will become less exciting, I think that the truth of how they work will become apparent, because it will just be, I think the truth comes out. So I think how they help people heal will become more clear, and I think that we'll still have it in our toolbox as a healing modality. Right? Like if you're a somatic practitioner and you've got mushrooms and you've got other somatic skills in your toolbox, it'll be one of the things that you'll use when it's appropriate with the client that's ready for it, rather than it being the thing that people are coming to seek. That is again my hope, but I really do believe that that is the truth of how this medicine works. Similar with like a therapist, it'll just be like, oh, I do EMDR, I do IFS, and I also have mushroom therapy in my toolbox. And there's a time when we're going to use this and we'll integrate it. And I think it'll help people heal when they're ready in relationships that are supportive and safe. And that is my hope and the way that I really see this going. In terms of, larger legalization, I imagine that it'll spread to other places. I think as more research comes up and there's more, I think that will really help us see how much bigger it's going to grow. Like, is the research really supporting the efficacy of mushrooms treating certain mental health issues and physical ailments, or not? And that will, I think, give us more information as to how it's going to spread. And my hope of hopes is that MDMA is not far behind, because I think it's an incredibly powerful and useful medicine, especially in the mental health realm, specifically for the treatment of trauma. And so I really do hope that Lykos is able to move that through the FDA process in the future. Shannon?
I would add, I agree with everything Dory said there. Those are my hopes also. And we try to be realistic. Like, there's a lot of people in my orbit in my life that have been in the psychedelic community or advocacy for a long time, and they get a little burnt out or worn down because of the sort of commodification and extractive sort of mentality of like, oh, let's just take this out and create a patentable product and then be able to all of the sort of capitalist sort of drive and motivation that is going to be present in my mind. It's just going to be. It's the world that we live in. Even as we try to disrupt these systems and these ways of being, we also exist within them and live within them at the same time that we're trying to disrupt them. And so this is going to be a very slow teasing out. And I am under no illusions that we're going to have some pure movement that is just the medicine just heals us all. And then we just walk in the world in new ways, and we don't care about making money anymore. And we have this like relationship to the earth. And like, that's not, we're going to be faced with all of who we are every step of the way. And I'm okay with that. Like, I feel like I can choose hope and optimism and keep taking steps forward and be part of this, at the same time being able to hold the facts, the reality that, yeah, it's going to be commodified, and there's these other paths that people are going to like take it down, just as we're taking it, trying to hold this path that we feel is calling us forward. I think that's just true with anything that's introduced into human hands. Yeah. It's not going to stay in its pure form, whatever that is. Maybe all of this is its pure form. Like, we don't know the sort of like the zoomed out bigger picture of this arc that we're on, this journey. And maybe all of this is part of it, right? Like, who's to say that it should only be this, what we think is like this pure way of holding it. And so I tried to make room for all of that. And because I think that's the reality, that in the next 5 years, we're going to see a lot of stuff that makes us physically sick in our bodies. Like, I can't believe that people are doing this with this medicine. And, I think that there's that for me, that's not my sign to like just go quit and go do something else. But for some people it is, and that's okay. But there's going to be a lot of realities to hold as we go forward.
Yep. As above, so below, everything in the world, right? Like, it's true. I actually say the same exact thing all the time. It's like a different form of spiritual bypassing. We can't just bypass that capitalism exists. I would love to just step out and go hang out on a mountaintop and, pretend like the rest of the world's okay. But that's like the ultimate spiritual bypass, right? I mean, it's been fascinating to witness the arguments inside this community, but it's every space. We find this I always say it's not just the medicine world. It's not just spiritual communities. It's everywhere. It's just, the nature of living as a human alive right now and being present with it. And like you said, we have to include it all. So this is the ultimate path to transmutation, right? So I'm so glad you share that perspective, and thank you so much. I will say to the audience, we're going to have all the links to the training, their practices, and Instagram, and you can click right here in the show notes and learn more. And I thank you for coming on. I have to say, when I would talk to Brad, I was like, I'm always a little skeptical when it's people I don't know, but I really honor what you're doing, and it feels good. And the way I see it too, it's like, okay, if people have like a really good intention in their heart and are really like watching their integrity, I also believe having a partnership, like two of you are running it. It's like, well, that's the ultimate integrity, right? Like, I have to have two people keeping you in check. So thank you so much for the work you're doing. And, I can't wait to see what happens over the next, year or two out there. And, it's, again, like everybody who's walking this path, it's going to be for some and not for others. But, if we stay with the grander mission of the healing of the planet, I think it's going to be all okay in the end, right? I hope.
Here's to hoping. Thank you so much for having us on. It was really good to meet you.
Thank you for being here. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you're feeling inspired, I'd appreciate it if you showed your love with a review. And check out my YouTube channel where you can find the video version of this podcast. You can also head to bethaweinstein.com to learn more about me and grab my free business growth trainings. Remember, you carry your own unique medicine, and your medicine is what we need for these times.